What's up, everyone? Sometimes you want to give your authenticated users the ability to view a draft before content is published. And luckily, Next.js with Payload CMS makes that simple. While setting it up may sound tricky, what I'm going to do in this video is walk you through step-by-step how to set it up simply using the tools that are available to us through Next.js and Payload CMS. If you want the code that I use in this video, there's a link to the repo in the description. Now, let's dive in. This video builds on a previous video I've done that talks all about versions, drafts, and live preview in Payload CMS. If you haven't checked out that video yet, I would pause here, go back and check out that video using the link in the description, and then restart this video after you have your drafts, versions, and live preview implemented. The only real prerequisite here, though, is that you have your content in a CMS, whether payload or otherwise, and a way to tell your CMS that the data that you want in return is a draft and not the actual published content. Luckily, I have all of that set up in a project already, so we'll use that to move forward. Next.js exposes a function called draftMode from next headers, and that's what we'll be using today to enable our draft mode. And so to get started with that, what we're going to do is go to our locale slug page. And so that's already open here, and then I can hide the sidebar. And then I'm going to import draft mode from next headers. Then in our default export, we can come down here and we can set a destructured constant, and we're going to get is enabled, and we're going to get that from our awaited draft mode. And we can rename is enabled to draft. That way we can have a cleaner find function from Payload CMS. And speaking of that, we can come down here to our payload find and remove our Boolean user from draft and just return draft. And then for our override access, we can do the same thing. Now, of course, you don't have to rename is enabled to draft. You could just pass in draft is enabled, but since I have it set up with draft already, I'll leave it as that. So this is all we really need to do for our front end, but leaving it here won't really do anything for us. In order to prepare Payload CMS for the draft content that we want to receive from it, we'll need to create two Next.js route handlers. One is required and the other one is optional depending on what you want to do. So the first one is going to be the optional one, and we're going to call that one exit preview. This can be used with the payload admin bar, for example, or if you wanted to roll your own kind of button that you can click to exit the preview, that's how you'll do this as well. We set up a route handler by adding a route.ts file to the directory. So I'll add a new directory to my front end that we will call a draft. And then in the draft, we're going to have another directory called exit preview. And now in exit preview, we're going to add a new file called route.ts. In this file, we need to import draft mode again from next headers, and we're going to export an async get function. And I'm going to capitalize all of that. And this is going to resolve to a promise response. And we're going to store our draft mode in a constant called draft, and we need to await draft mode. Then we're going to set the disable flag on our draft, and then we'll return a new response that says draft mode is disabled. Once that's done, we can add another directory to our draft, and we'll call this one preview. In the preview directory, we need to add, of course, a route.ts. And now from payload, we're going to import a couple of types. The first one is going to be our collection slug, and the second one, our payload request. Then we'll import our get payload from payload. We're going to get the config promise from payload config. Then we're going to, of course, add draft mode from next headers, and then finally we're going to get redirect from next navigation. We'll export an async function called get and open up that function, but here we're going to get our rec param, and we're going to get our cookies out of that, and we're going to have a get method that takes the name of our cookie and returns a value, which is a string. Now, all of this is going to intersect with a typical request type. All of it will resolve to a promised response. And inside the function, we're going to have our constant of payload await our get payload config promise. We're going to get our search params, and this will be from a new URL, which is going to take the request URL. Then we'll have a constant path and get our search params get path, a collection, which will get the collection as a collection slug. Then we'll get our slug, which will be search params.get slug, our locale, which will get the locale, and then finally a preview secret, which we've not created yet, but we'll get there. Then we'll check if the preview secret is not equal to our environment variable of preview secret. We'll return a new response that says you are not allowed to preview this page and return a status of 403. We'll then check if our path, collection, slug, or locale are undefined or false. If they are, we can return a new response saying missing required parameters and return a 404. After that, we'll check if our path doesn't start with a /. We can return a new response and say in this response that this endpoint can only be used for relative previews. And then we're going to return a status of 500. Now we're going to initialize our user using a let variable, and we're going to try to get our user by awaiting our payload.auth. And we're going to use our request here by first casting it as unknown and then as our payload request. And then we will pass in our headers using our rec headers. We'll then catch our error, which we'll set as E, and we'll log that error using our payload logger. And we'll pass in our error of E, and then we'll say error verifying token for live preview. Then we can return a new response saying you're not allowed to preview this page and pass in a 403 response. After all of that, we can set a constant called draft and await draft mode. Check if there is no user. If there is no user, we will disable draft mode and then return a new response saying that you're not allowed to preview this page, and again pass in a 403. Now, if you want to add more checks here, like using ways to check a role or anything else like that, you can do that here. But for now, what we're going to do is, if all of this passes, we can enable draft mode and then redirect to the path. Now we can generate our preview secret by running openSSL random base6432, and then you're going to take this and you're going to put it into your environment variable called preview secret. Now, I've already done this with my .env file, but you'll need to put your own unique 32 character or more secret in your .env file to move forward. Before we start talking about setting up revalidation, check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Next.js, Payload CMS, Tailwind CSS, and more. Tired of trying to keep up with all of the news and updates from across the industry? Sign up for my newsletter to get bi-weekly overviews of all of the web dev news from across the internet. The link to that is in the description below. Thank you for your support. Now, let's get back to it. The last thing we need to do to implement this is to set up revalidation. Specifically, we're going to use on-demand revalidation to clear the cache of a document and then serve that new document when it refreshes. We're going to use hooks to implement this. If you're not familiar with Payload CMS hooks, you can check out my video on collection hooks in Payload CMS in the link in the description below. The first thing we need to do is go to our project and then down to our pages, and we're going to add a new directory called hooks, and in this directory we're going to add a new file that we'll call revalidate page.ts. In this file, we're going to import a couple of types, our collection after change hook, and then since we're in here, let's actually set up our collection after delete hook as well. We'll then need to import our revalidate path from next cache. Then we're going to import our type of page from payload types. Export a new constant called revalidate page and assign it the type collection after change hook. We're going to change this from a generic to be specific to our page types. We don't need this to be an async function, but we do want to get our doc and previous doc from our page as well as our request so we can get our payload object from it as well. We'll then go into the function and we'll check if our doc status is equal to publish. We can store our doc slug using some ternary operators here to check if it's the home route, and if it is, we'll return a /. Otherwise, we'll return the doc slug, and then we can set this equal to a constant called path. And then we can use our payload logger info and say that we're revalidating this page at this path. We can then actually revalidate the path by passing in the path. This will clear the cache and present the most recent version of this published page. Now we need to handle the case that we set this page to anything other than published, like draft or changed. We can do that by using an if check to see if the previous doc, if it exists, has the status of published, and the doc status, so this is the current document, does not have the status of published. We can do the same thing that we did for our path above, but instead of using the doc, we're going to use our previous doc slug. We'll then again log that we're revalidating this path at the old path, which will change that just to be extra clear. And then we can actually revalidate the old path. Then we'll return the document. While we're at it, we are going to export another constant called revalidate page on delete. And we will have a collection after delete hook that makes it specific to the page. We'll get just the doc, we don't need the request. And then in the function, we can set our path and get it set equal to doc.slug equals home. And if it does equal home, we get the /. Otherwise, we use doc.slug, and then we can revalidate the path at the path and then return the doc afterwards. Then we need to add these to our page's config, which we can add to the collection level using the hooks option. And we'll have an after delete and an after change hook. And so here we can get our revalidate page on delete and then revalidate page. And we can see here that these imported automatically for me. Make sure they do the same for you. Now we need a way to hit that preview route that we set up. We can do that using our preview function in our admin option. So I'm going to add admin, and then in this we're going to add our preview, and then we're going to get our doc and our options. And then we will open up a function. Inside the function, we're going to have a constant called encoded params, and that's going to be set equal to a new URL search params. And inside this, we will need a slug, which will be our doc slug as string, our path, which will be our doc slug, and we're always making sure that we account for the home page in our page's route. So we do that using the /, and then otherwise we will get our doc slug and make sure that we have a / to start. Then underneath our path, we'll have a collection which will hardcode to pages since that's the collection slug here. Then we need our preview secret, which will be an environment variable called preview secret. Otherwise, it'll be an empty string. And then we'll get our locale, which will be our options locale. Then we can return our preview route, which is going to be constructed using our environment variable next public server URL, and then our API route, which is draft preview. And then finally, with our encoded params, to string. Now we need to get our query in the cache to then be revalidated by our after change hook. We'll do that by moving our query from our default export here down into a React cache function. And we'll do that first by importing React from React as well as cache from React. Then we'll go to the bottom of the page and we're going to set a new constant called query page by slug and set it equal to a cache function. We'll then pass in an async callback function, which will take our slug and our locale. And then we will add our types here as well. So we'll have slug, which will be a type of string, and our locale, which is going to be our typed locale. Now in our function, we're just going to take our whole query here, so our constant of page, and we're going to cut that and add it to query page by slug, as well as our isEnabled constant here. We can cut that and add it to the function here as well. We then need to copy our payload object down here below draftMode, and we're going to finish off this find method a little differently, where we're going to return our page docs if they exist. Just get the first one, otherwise we'll have null. And then above our not found check here, we will set a new constant called page, set that equal to await query page by slug, and pass in our slug and our locale. As it is now, because of our localization, our API route gets redirected based on its locale, and we don't want that. So we're going to go over to our middleware file, and down in our matcher, we're just going to add our draft to the list. And using draft here, we'll take it out of our redirects for locale. Now we can test this out. Let's spin up our development server by running pnpm dev, and we're going to go to our local host en portfolio. Once that loads, we can see here the published portfolio document. Now we can go over to our admin dashboard, go to our pages, and go to our portfolio, and we can make a change here. And now, if I hit preview, I can preview the change that I made. And as I'm making changes, I can refresh and see those changes apply. Now we need to see what this looks like when I'm not logged in, so I need to turn off my auto login by commenting out this piece of code. And when I save that, and then try to go to an incognito window and go to my portfolio, I see the difference here. I'm no longer seeing the draft, I'm seeing the most recent published document. And that's it for draft previews. With Next.js and Payload CMS, it's fairly simple to set up. This allows you to give specific users that you define the ability to view draft content before it's published, even in a production environment. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Next.js, Payload CMS, Tailwind CSS, and more. Be sure to subscribe to my newsletter as well so you can stay up to date with all of the industry news from across the internet. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.